So here we are with the lecture on family, and this is meant to build on and clarify what's in your book. And we're going to review that same model that your book has. I'm hoping, as I discuss here, it'll make it a bit more clear. And yes, that content on family from about the model that the book talks about, that actually will be on the third exam. So in this model of family dynamics, we get two variables, and one is conformity, right? Low and high conformity there. And so low conformity is the idea that you don't have to meet expectations. There's probably not a lot of rules. It's just you don't have to conform. It's low conformity. You know, your parents, or I should say your parents, whoever it is that's raising you, or the adults raising you, don't set really hard expectations. You don't have to, right? You do well in school, you don't do well in school. You're out late, you're back home early. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. In high conformity, those things are a big deal, right? How you do in school, how you behave, where you're going, it's expected that you will conform to the rules and the expectations. So it's a high conformity. So low and high conformity is one axis there. And the other is about conversation. So very sort of communication thing, right? How much do we talk? How much do we talk together about an actual talk? Or I should say actual conversation. The back and forth between the adults and the children. How much is there that? Is it low conversation where there's not a lot of talk in general? Is it there's a certain amount of talk, but it's low in being conversation because is the adults telling the children what to do, or the children and the adults dialoguing back and forth, right? So those are the two variables. So depending upon where we fall in those four sort of corners we've created, is a different type of family. And these are axes, and so it's a continuum, right? So it's not that you're high or low conversation, but maybe your family was moderately high or more high than low or something like that. Okay. So first we get the pluralistic family. So in a pluralistic family, there's low conformity, right? There's not a high pressure on you conforming, but yet there's a lot of conversations, high conversations. There's a lot of talking, a lot of dialogue. So expectations are implied, right? They may not be stated, but they're implied. What it is we're hoping you'll do and how you'll behave. There's a lot of open talk between the parents and children, a lot of open talk about the rules, about issues in life, alcohol, drugs, sex, that sort of stuff. There's very open talk about that, right? Because it's high conversation, low conformity, the parents are very open to hearing the children's views, even if they disagree. They're willing to hear what their view on something is. They're open to that. There's not a lot in the way of negative feelings. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I'm not endorsing this. What I'm saying is there's not a lot of negative feelings because there's very low conformity, right? So if there's not a pressure to conform, there's not a lot of upset because you're not meeting your expectations, nor feeling bad because you're not meeting your adults' expectations, right? So there's not a lot of negative feelings there. And there's a high emphasis upon, because it's low conformity, life lessons, right? You go out and you learn just from experiencing life by exploring, by trying, by failing some, right? And so value then on self-exploration and just sort of learning from life. Again, because it's that lower conformity. This high conversation is very sort of open to dialogue about, so how'd that go when you did that? Oh, so probably not a good idea, huh? Right? I mean, this might be this sort of family, just as an example, and I'm not endorsing anything at all here, where the teen, right, so underage for drinking, goes out, drinks, and gets drunk, and the parent knows about it, and says, oh, so you drank a bunch of beer last night, so how'd it go? And they go, well, it was okay, but then, oh my gosh, I did some dumb things, and I got sick this morning. Go, oh, that doesn't sound like a real smart thing, right? So there's a dialogue about the thing, but also allowing the children to have that experience. Again, I'm not saying allowing, like, that's a great thing to do, that sort of underage drinking. I'm just saying that in that family, that's what's done. To be very clear, I'm not endorsing any pattern here at all, because you gotta figure it out your own way and also recognize how you were raised. So the second family type I want to talk about is consensual. So a lot of talking, right? High conversation, but you'll notice high conformity to meet expectations. So here, children, again, they are encouraged to speak up, right? Please, here's the rule. You don't like it. Why don't you like the rule? Go ahead and tell us. But because it's high conformity, after the child expresses why they don't like the rule, the parent says, I hear you, but this is why that rule is that way. Now do it. Right? So there's a dialogue, right? And that's more of the extreme, right? But it's moving toward that end of, sure, we can talk about the rules we have and the expectations of why you are going to go to college or why you're going to do X or Y. Yeah, we can talk about why that is, and I'm willing for you to tell me why it is you don't like that, and that's fine. But then at the end of the day, you do what I told you to do, right? And so yeah, I mean that's a high conversation, high conformity. I was just thinking as I'm talking about my own child rearing, and I fall in different places, but there are moments, for instance, with my daughter, she wants to know why things are a certain way, and so I tell her, but I expect her to do them. Like, go to bed because you have to get up for school in the morning, right? So I'm a little higher conformity that way, as opposed to just letting her stay up and figuring out that it's a bad idea to stay up until 2 in the morning when you have to get up for school at 7, you know. Back in the days when children actually went off to school. Okay, but that's a consensual family. I wouldn't say we're wholly consensual. Doesn't matter. Who cares? All right. Oh, sorry. Whoops. Ultimately, children's thoughts and opinions are discounted, though. Right. So this is why I'm not entirely in a consensual household there. But overall, children's opinions, they're discounted. So children can express themselves, but then in the end, we don't care. I understand why you're unhappy with that. I'm not going to factor in a whole lot. Now, maybe you're from a family, or in your own families, you're raising children, perhaps. You're not all the way at the extreme of that, but moderately, right? Because I'm talking about some of the more extremes, then sometimes it's, less of that. Okay, so these families often rely very heavily on outside support because to maintain that conformity, to maintain the children following all the rules and the norms, there's a lot of outside support. That outside support certainly can be other family members, right? So you, or however family is being defined there. So whenever the adults have to leave the children in the care of somebody else, right, they're relying upon those likely to be family members, maybe like grandparents, to enforce those same rules. Also, outside support might be things like the teachers, the teachers at school, right, that they are expecting those teachers to enforce those same high standards, right? In these families, children are often stressed because of the high demands and expectations, right? Because it's high conformity, children they feel a lot of stress, and their parents won't explain to them why they have the expectations, but those expectations remain. So the children often feel stressed in these families. We go to the opposite of that bottom left corner there, or quadrant, and that's laissez-faire. I've never pronounced that word correctly. I've tried it 18 different ways, so let's just skip it. These are pretty laid-back families, right? And this means hands-off, right? Laissez-faire, right? It means hands-off, so they're pretty laid back. Children make a lot of their own decisions, right? So it's low conformity, and they're encouraged to be independent. And part of that is that low conversation. That sort of be independent, not go and explore and let's talk about what that was like, but go figure it out. I don't know, kid, you're on your own, right? As opposed to, well, try it and let me know how it goes. This is more of which is in pluralistic. Laissez-faire is more like, well, I mean, whatever, do whatever. I gotta go. I mean, it's it's laissez-faire. In these families, children don't often show much interest, because there is that minimal connection with the family because of low conversation and low conformity. Children have a sort of low interest. In fact, they report often not feeling very much part of a family. Okay? In these low conversation, low conformity families, children report not feeling very much in a family, and sometimes have used the expression feeling emotionally divorced, right? It's like, I don't know, like there's just not, we're all in this household, and yeah, but there's not like support, there's not expectations, so there's so much high on being independent that children don't feel the sense of being able to be dependent and connect to others, right? And again, it's low conversation, there's minimal communication, so kids sort of come and go a little bit more as they will, right? And then the last quadrant is the protective, right? With these protective families. So here, low conversation, but very high conformity, right? So the adults say, we have very clear, specific standards, and you will do it. And I don't want to hear back, right? I don't want back talk. I don't want to hear you complaining. Just do it, right? I'm making it sound really rough. I mean, although it sort of can be. So here, conflict is avoided, right? And these families, they avoid conflict. How do they avoid conflict? By having low conversation, right? The adults expect the children to do what they say, and that's it, right? We're not having conflict because you're not expressing yourself as they do in consensual, right? There are, as I say, there are high expectations for children. The children are expected to adhere to the adults' values, to the parents' values. There is not the need to explain the rule, right? You have to be back here at 10 p.m. Why? Because I said 10 p.m. and not 9 p.m. You're welcome, right? That's sort of low conversation. Not, the reason is because you have school tomorrow. The reason is because I find that when you stay out later, X and Y happens. The reason is because I think that it's more dangerous when you're out later because there's more drunks on the road or whatever. I mean, that would be a consensual explaining the reason why. Protective, there's not an explanation for it. You do it because I told you to, right? They say there's not much conversation because they're low conversation. There's not a lot of talking about what happened in your day and so forth. There's not a lot of that goes on. I don't want to dictate what families should do, what you should be doing in your own families, as if you may or now or later have children. But there is these families result in high levels of negative feelings and hostility, right? Because there's not conversation and engagement, but really high expectations and firm rules. So think, if you ever saw The Sound of Music, think like the Von Trapp children before Maria shows up, right? It's a protective. And that I like that word on there, right? It's protective because the parents believe that they're doing their very best to protect their children by setting firm rules and not being open, being open, right? They're impervious to their children's opinions and feelings. They're trying to be protective, but in doing that, it does have a tendency to create more hostility. Okay, so we're going to pause, and I'm going to go into lecture 3 talking about attachment theory. So there we are.